Hello, everyone. Have I got an interesting deck here for you? This is a variant of a deck that some of you who have been watching the channel for a while might start to recognize very quickly, but this is a shattering-based deck. Back a while ago, I was a big fan of Horseshoes, and I still am trying to figure out what to do with that card effectively. But I think this shell is kind of a neat one to play around with as well. The Shattering is a multi-discipline Anarch card. We're basically focusing on this as the Protean version, which is basically a D action to inflict 2 damage on any ready minion. It is at 0 stealth, unfortunately, and it does normally cost 1 blood. But 2 damage can be a lot in the right situations. But in this case, this is actually the same as Horseshoes because it is free. We are playing Salvador Garcia. While he's ready, cards requiring an Anarch cost you and Anarchs you control 1 fewer blood or pool. That means that all of our Shatterings are free, along with a number of other neat cards that we are playing to help back up our strategy. But let's focus on those vampires for a second. So outside of just Salvador Garcia, we're playing some converts because the vampires we're playing are definitely not going to just be Anarchs. In fact, none of them by default are Anarchs. What we do have, though, is we have Henry Taylor. Henry is pretty awesome in the slot, has all the disciplines that we're going to want for the deck, and a great ability that says at the end of an action, we can take one of the combat cards we played from the action, put it on top of our library. This may come in handy when our actions are blocked. If it never does, we don't really lose in this particular case. We still get what we wanted out of this, which is a successful action. We're also playing Steve Booth, again, just for the discipline spread. Such a great set of disciplines on a vampire that's only a 5 cap. And then we're playing Maria Stone. Now, Maria's a little off, no potence, obviously, and that will come up in some rare cases, but Maria is a very solid vampire. The minus to strength does hurt in some circumstances. I've been thinking about maybe playing a copy of the non-advanced version as well for maybe some merge opportunities. But I think overall, based on the discipline spread, it's a pretty good situation. And as we go further down the deck list, there are some circumstances where that's actually going to pay off, that her discipline spread is a little bit different. So looking at the cards that support these guys, we have a number of masters, pretty obvious on some of them. We're playing Anarch Free Press. It's free because of Sal's ability. We're also playing Carfax Abbey, which is only going to cost us 1 because of Sal's ability. We are playing Libertas because with Sal, this card is amazing. This card says that you put it on an Anarch, and then allies, first of all, are never a problem for blocking your stuff. Dominate and presence cards are going to cost people additional blood to play. That means against blocks. That means against blockings. That means that against bleeds. That means against combat cards. So, of course, the biggest things we're talking about here are bleed bounces, cost 1 more. Ending combat and unlocking, cost 1 more. Playing cards, it's very interesting here, but playing cards that are going to buff a bleed are going to cost 1 more if we're still in the attempt to block. So playing a card that, like, of course, I forget the name of the card, but playing the Dominate or Presence cards that give you negative intercept / stealth are going to be problematic for you. Libertas is a great card. The cost can be sometimes prohibitive for a lot of decks, and it's a master, so your mileage sometimes varies with this card. But I think it's a really great card. I think it's kind of an underplayed card, and I think with Sal, it's a really great value at 0. Also playing some Vessels to move blood back and forth for vampires. Playing a copy of WMRH, just really for a little cheap intercept. Might cost us a little bit to play it, but we might get some value out of it every once in a while. Same with Wall Street Financial or Wall Street Knight. Also playing 9 copies of Gear Up. This might seem like a lot, but in the Presence ability, it is basically a free action of sorts. It is a +1 stealth action. It might get blocked. That might suck. In the situations where it doesn't, it's going to give you a bonus stealth on all of your vampire's actions. I'm sorry, on whatever vampire is performing the action. And then they get to unlock. Great card with Henry Taylor. If they block, you're not at a loss. If they don't block, you're not at a loss. It's going to let you really cycle through some cards, and it's not an action a lot of people are frequently going to block, unless you happen to get a really overly aggressive wall deck, and at that point, well, shit happens. And maybe you just toss the gear ups and go on with the rest of the deck, which does include the 9 aforementioned Shatterings. Also, a single copy of Status Perfectus. It's a very weird card. You put it in play, and you can move a blood from an Anarch to another Anarch that you have, or you can have another round of combat happen with another Anarch. Yeah, it's a really interesting card. There is some relevance here, though, in the secondary half of this. In the combat with the other Anarch that you create, you're going to get a round where your opponent just doesn't get to strike. So let's say you have a block that happens on. Let's say you block an action and you have a combat that doesn't go as well. Maybe the combat ends. You lock this, you start another combat with your other Anarch. Now they don't get to end combat. Why do we care so much about combat? Well, we have a handful of fun little surprise combat cards. We are playing 4 copies of Bollocks. Nice little hand strike just for the surprise. Get them with a little ag when they're not expecting it. Also running a few copies of Dust Up for a nice strong hit or for a dodge with a reasonable hit. Also playing some ground fighting to make sure they stay at close, and some Bollocks just in case. Also, we can use it as a maneuver, so nice versatility in that card. You'll also find that Donnybrook, in some rare cases, is where Maria might be able to showcase a little bit of the difference. She's got that obfuscate, so every once in a while you're going to find that the burning equipment or retainer might come in handy. Very useful there. Also, going back up the chain, we are playing 9 copies of Undue Influence. We're playing cheap vampires. Undue Influence is by default a +1 stealth bleed for presence, and it's going to help you push out some of your vampires a little bit faster. That's pretty good for what the deck wants to do. We're also playing 2 copies, we're playing a copy of Grey Thorn and Vivian Giraud. Giraud can do a lot of the actions that we want to do, and we largely don't care about the negative sides of it. Her being stolen isn't really a big deal. If it is stolen, we can always either just kill it if it becomes a problem, or we can just steal it back. Also, if it happens to be a situation where we have a political-based deck, we can toss Vivian on that deck, and they can figure out what they're going to have to do with it later on. In the meantime, though, having some celerity is not irrelevant in this deck for a handful of circumstances. Gray is also nice here because, again, having celerity and potence is going to be useful from time to time in the deck. Both of them, of course, have a built-in bleed. Both of them have hand strike damage, and both of them get reduced by Sal's ability. So Gray is only a single blood card, and Vivian is free for this deck. We're also playing 5 copies of Crypt Suns, a card that I think at its current price is a little high. It is 1 blood, but you do get a 1 range damage effect during combat, and the ability to, when you're blocked, cancel a combat. You don't even start the combat, just cancel a combat and keep the action still going. And it's not burning the card, it's burning 1 life. So you get 3 hits of this effect from this card. A very, very effective card in a lot of situations, especially if you're going to be a low stealth deck. You can really just keep the pressure on without having to use a lot of resources. We're also playing 9 copies of Crime Think. Hold on one sec. This card, everyone knows about it. And if you don't, well, then surprise, this is actually a new thing to you. But this will let you unlock after performing an action requiring an Anarch or making the Vampire Anarch. You're going to want to use this a lot. You can Shattering into a Crypt Suns or reverse. You can Crypt Suns into a Shattering or into a Undue Influence. It's going to be a really nice thing to give you a little bit more room to do more actions. Multi-act is pretty important here. And while we've only got 1 Vampire with Fortitude, it doesn't matter because most of the actions you're going to be performing are going to be actions that are Anarch based. Gear Up, Shattering, Undue Influence, Status Perfectus, and both your allies and your retainers, all of which benefiting hugely from this card. Also playing 9 copies of Power of One because this is nice and versatile. We can use it at its potence if the vampires only got it for a bleed, or we can use it as presence for a stealth and a bleed. Very good either direction. We're also playing 1 copy of Lalo. I don't know if this is a good card or not. I really just like it for the rare occasions where this can really be a nice salvation. This is used for when you happen to Diablerize a vampire, you can basically save the vampire from being burned. It's ultimately pretty useful. It does push them in the uncontrolled, but you can just influence them out. It's a really minor penalty for being able to eat a vampire when you need to. Also works surprisingly well with Anarch converts. So yeah, I think it's better than some people might expect, but again, it is situationally useful. So you may not get use out of it every time you play it, but I definitely think it's a card that is 100% worth giving a shot. Also playing some intercept cards, 3 Eyes of the Beast. It's a decent little card, very inexpensive at 0 cost. You do lose a stealth for your next turn, but that's a pretty minor drawback for just a straight up free intercept card that in this deck is probably not going to get you at superior, but it is going to it is still a great card even without that functionality. We're also playing 3 of Party Out of Bounds, another card that gives you just a free intercept. Also useful for the deck because we can use the other 2 modes from time to time. We can reduce bleeds sometimes if we need to, and we can grab a couple of votes against a political action that might be problematic. So pretty neat card to have just for all-around versatility. Power of All is a personal favorite of mine. It's really more of a pet card. You may or may not decide this card works for you. This is basically a DI that your minions can play, but you do have to have 2 minions play it. One that has to pay the cost, so in this case 1 because of Sal, and 1 that has to lock in addition. So it can be pretty costly, but it is pretty key when you need to cancel just the right card at just the right time. And then of course Protection Racket, another free card that just gives us a bonus intercept for being Anarch, and maybe a second bonus intercept if they happen to be a titled vampire. So I think the deck's got a lot of potential. I haven't gotten a chance to run it through its paces yet, but I think it's got a lot of tools here that could be a lot of fun. I think there's room to change up a few things more to your taste. I know Shattering is more of a pet card for me, but I think you could just as easily rip the Shatterings out if you wanted to, decide whether or not you want to keep the gear ups, and turn this into a pretty straightforward bleed deck that would do a lot of damage, especially with Power of 1. You also, if you wanted to go the bleed route, could throw in, let me pull up this card for you here, Presence and Anarch. You also have Memory Rift that you could play here for the Combat Ends. I thought maybe I'm losing my mind on one of these cards. It may not exist in the way that I thought that card did. Is it Potence then? It is Animalism. That's what I'm thinking of Adhocracy. See, everybody makes mistakes. But you could just as easily in the deck manage to play any number of the regular Presence bleed cards that aren't Anarch specific to go along with the Power of 1 to give yourself a little bit more like bleed push in these particular situations. So there's a lot of room for the deck to go in a few different directions, even with just the shell I'm presenting here. If you like it, give it a try, build it up, let me know your thoughts, let me know if there's a direction you went differently with it, and I'm looking forward to playing this in the very near future. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.